After a double shift at the hospital, she just wanted to fill up her tank and go home, until 2 officers surrounded her car. What they didn't know, her father was Delta Force. She didn't even want to stop. Tamika Rollins was running on caffeine, adrenaline, and a mother's willpower. 2 back-to-back shifts at Baldwin County Hospital had left her feet sore, her eyes dry, and her mind floating somewhere between exhaustion and survival. It was close to 11:30 p.m. The twins were already at home with the neighbor, and she just needed to make it back to her small house on West Elm before midnight. But the gaslight blinked orange. She pulled into an old Shell station just outside Milledgeville, Georgia. It was one of those half-lit lots with flickering overheads and a dusty snack aisle behind thick, bulletproof glass. Her silver Toyota Camry crept up to pump number 4. She left the engine running, not wanting to risk the car acting up again. Scrubs still wrinkled from the ICU, Tamika reached for her card, glanced around, and exhaled. Then headlights flared in her rearview mirror. A Baldwin County Sheriff's SUV swung in behind her, fast. She squinted. Another pulled in across the lot, parking at an angle like they were blocking her in. 2 officers stepped out, young, maybe mid-30s. Hands already on their belts. Tamika's stomach turned, but she kept her hands visible and didn't move. "Ma'am," the first officer said, approaching with a flashlight. "Can I see your license and registration?" She blinked. "Is there a problem, officer?" "We got a call about a suspicious vehicle matching this description. Need to make sure it's not stolen." Her voice stayed calm. "I just got off work. I'm a nurse at Baldwin County General. My ID's still on me." She pointed slowly to her hospital badge clipped to her top. Her fingers trembled. The officer didn't glance at it. "Registration and ID. Now." She reached for her wallet on the passenger seat, slow, deliberate, heart thumping like it might climb out of her chest. She'd done everything right. Hands where they could see. Clear voice. No sudden moves. Still, there was something in their tone. Something practiced. "What's your business here?" the second officer chimed in, circling around to the passenger side. "Gas station closed in 10. I needed gas. My tank's empty." "You live around here?" "Yes." He leaned in, eyes darting toward the back seat where a car seat sat covered with a small fleece blanket. "You got someone with you?" "No, just me." A pause. Then the first officer said, "Pop the trunk." Her eyebrows lifted. "Excuse me?" "Pop the trunk." She stared at him. "On what grounds?" The officer stepped forward, his voice hardening. "Ma'am, this is a routine request. If you don't comply, we may have to escalate." Tamika swallowed. She could almost feel her heart pressing against her ribs. Not tonight. Not after everything she'd gone through. Not with her kids waiting. "I'm calling my father," she said quietly. "Ma'am, we're giving you a lawful order." She raised one hand slowly. "I'm calling my father, right now." There was something about the way she said it. Not loud, not defiant. Just certain. She turned her back to them, keeping one hand raised, and dialed the number she knew by heart. He picked up after one ring. "Tamika." Her throat tightened. "Daddy, I need you to come to the Shell station off Highway 22. Right now." A pause. Then only 3 words. "I'm on my way." She hung up. The officers exchanged glances. "What was that?" one asked. She didn't answer. They weren't going to like who was coming, but they had no idea just how badly they'd misjudged her. The night air had turned thick with silence. Tamika stood still, phone in one hand, heart in the other. The officers didn't back off. If anything, they drew in closer, like they were sizing her up now that she had the nerve to make a phone call. She wasn't yelling. She wasn't crying. That seemed to bother them more than anything else. "You don't want to make this more complicated than it needs to be," the one with the square jaw said. His nameplate read Hobson. The other one, quieter but watching every move she made, was Deputy Fielder. Fielder looked younger, more unsure. But he wasn't stopping Hobson, just standing by, letting it all play out. "I'm standing here, doing nothing wrong," Tamika said. "You asked for ID, I gave it. You asked where I live, I told you. Why are you still pressing me?" "We're not pressing you," Hobson replied, voice clipped. "We're doing our job." "Your job doesn't include treating people like criminals without cause." Hobson stepped even closer, hand brushing over his holster. Not grabbing, not unholstering, just reminding. "You got a problem with law enforcement?" Tamika let out a breath. "No, I have a problem with being treated like I'm guilty for existing." That was when he smirked. A little twitch at the corner of his mouth, like she'd just confirmed what he thought all along. "You keep pushing," he said, "and we'll have to bring you in. Loitering. Interfering with an investigation." "Investigation of what?" she asked, her voice sharper now. "I stopped for gas. That's it. No one called on me. You're making something out of nothing." Fielder finally stepped in, his voice less rigid. "We got a vague report about a silver vehicle in this area. Could have been a mix-up." Tamika turned to him, eyes narrowing. "So let me get this straight. You pulled in behind me with backup for a vague report." He didn't answer. "I'm a nurse. I just came off a 14-hour shift saving people's lives. I've got 2 kids at home, and I'm standing here being treated like I robbed the place." Silence stretched again, heavy and awkward. That's when the clerk inside stepped out. Young guy, maybe 19. Skinny, tall, wearing a bright orange hoodie with grease stains on the sleeves. "Hey, officers," he said, trying to keep his voice neutral. "She's been here like 2 minutes. Ain't bothering anybody. Cameras caught everything if you need it." Hobson shot him a glare. "Stay inside, son. This doesn't concern you." The kid looked at Tamika, then back at the deputies. "It kinda does. She's just getting gas." "Get inside." He backed away, muttering under his breath. Tamika glanced at the pump. Still not started. Her hands were trembling too hard to type in her PIN. She looked back at Hobson. "I'm not scared of you." He chuckled. "You should be." But even as he said it, something about her stillness seemed to make him uneasy. Far in the distance, tires hissed over gravel. A vehicle turned off the highway and crept into the lot. Black SUV, windows tinted deep. It rolled to a stop in the space next to her car like it had every right to be there. Which it did. The driver's door opened. Out stepped a man. About 6'3". Solid build. Stone grey, close-cropped hair. Eyes that didn't wander. Skin dark and weathered. He moved like someone who didn't need to announce himself. Didn't ask for permission. "Tamika," he said. "Daddy," she exhaled, and her shoulders dropped an inch. Not relaxed. Just braced. Colonel Darius Rollins didn't look at the officers right away. He looked at his daughter. Checked her face. Her posture. Her hands. Then he turned his head, slow and deliberate, toward Hobson and Fielder. "Problem here, gentlemen?" he asked. But neither of them seemed ready to answer. Colonel Darius Rollins didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. There was something about him. How he stood. How his eyes locked onto Hobson's without blinking. That shifted the energy in the parking lot. It was the kind of presence you didn't learn in a classroom or on patrol. It came from years of commanding soldiers in places the average man couldn't even pronounce. Places where a mistake meant someone didn't come home. He stepped between his daughter and the officers like it was second nature. Hobson adjusted his stance. "Sir, this is a police matter. We're conducting an investigation." Darius tilted his head. "An investigation," he repeated, voice even. "Of a nurse. In scrubs. At a gas pump. You got body cam footage of that?" Fielder shifted uncomfortably. Hobson stiffened. "We were following protocol. We received a report." Darius cut him off, voice low, but unmistakably firm. "You got a license plate match? A make? A model? Anything more than a black woman in a silver car?" Silence. He didn't wait for an answer. "Let me tell you what I see," Darius continued, now pacing just slightly, hands behind his back. "A woman alone. Tired. Still in uniform after saving lives. And I see 2 men using the weight of their badge to bully someone who didn't do a damn thing." Hobson took a step forward. "I don't appreciate— You don't need to appreciate anything," Darius said, eyes locked. You need to think very hard about where you are and who you're speaking to. For a second, it looked like Hobson was going to push back. His mouth opened. Then it closed. Something in Darius's tone, the calm certainty, landed like a warning. The gas station clerk had come back outside, phone in hand, filming now. A couple in a pickup across the lot was watching too, window rolled halfway down. Even the late-night breeze seemed to pause. Tamika finally moved. She reached for the gas nozzle and started pumping. No one stopped her this time. Darius looked at Fielder. You the backup? Fielder gave a short nod. Yes, sir. You got any children? Yes, sir. 2 boys. You'd want someone doing this to their mother? Fielder didn't answer. I didn't think so. Darius turned to Hobson again, this time holding his stare longer. You don't know who I am, do you? I don't care who you are, Hobson snapped, trying to reclaim control. Wrong move. Darius took a step forward, slow and deliberate. Colonel Darius Rollins, 32 years U.S. Army, last 10 with the 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment Delta. People don't say no to me. They say sir. Hobson's jaw tightened, but his hand dropped from his belt. And right now, sir, Darius added, you're going to let my daughter finish getting gas, and then you're going to leave. You're not going to follow her. You're not going to harass her. You're not going to write up some backdated charge to justify your ego. He paused. Because if you do, I make one phone call, and your badge, your pension, and whatever power you think you've got disappears before breakfast. Fielder took a half step back. Hobson stood still. Tamika finished at the pump, replaced the nozzle, and closed the tank. She looked at her father. We good? He didn't take his eyes off the officers. We're good. She walked slowly to the driver's seat, opened the door, and got in. The engine was still running. Darius didn't move until she was safely inside. Then, as if finally dismissing a nuisance, he turned away from Hobson and walked to his SUV. But what happened next would follow those officers far beyond that parking lot. The SUV hadn't even left the lot before the gas station clerk stepped outside again, this time waving his phone. I got the whole thing, he said. From the moment she pulled up. Fielder blinked. What do you mean? Security cams, plus my phone. I saw what happened. He looked at Hobson now, and the fear was gone from his face. You came at her for nothing. Hobson tried to regain control. You interfering with law enforcement? Nope, the kid said. Just keeping folks honest. Inside the store, the old man who ran the counter most nights, Mr. Burton, folks called him, was already pulling up the security footage. Cameras covered the pumps, the sidewalk, even a decent angle toward the officer's SUV. When he saw Tamika standing still, being questioned without cause, the old man muttered under his breath, This ain't gonna look good. Darius hadn't gone far. He'd parked across the street, watching from behind tinted glass. Not stalking, just staying close enough in case they tried anything after he left. Years in the military had taught him never to assume the job was done just because the tone had changed. People liked to wait until they thought no one was watching. Inside the store, Mr. Burton picked up his phone. Mayor Klein, he said. You're going to want to see something. Back in the Camry, Tamika hadn't spoken yet. Her hands were gripping the steering wheel even though the car was in park. Darius walked back across the road, this time more slowly, knocking gently on her window. She rolled it down. You all right? He asked. I'm fine, she said, voice flat. Just angry. He leaned his arm on the roof. You handled yourself better than most. They always look at me like I'm lying, she said, finally turning to face him. Like being black and tired in public is some kind of threat. He looked at her for a long moment, then said, You didn't fold. You didn't cry. You stayed standing, but I shouldn't have to. No, he agreed. You shouldn't. She looked at him. Were you always like that? Calm, I mean. He smiled just slightly. Not always. But I learned the loudest man in the room usually has the least power. Silence can be its own weapon. She nodded slowly. I need to be more like that. He shook his head. No, you need to be you. But you don't have to fight every war alone. Just then, another car pulled into the lot. Sleek black sedan, tinted windows, city tags. A man in a navy suit stepped out, clipboard in hand. He moved quickly toward Mr. Burton inside the store. Mayor Clive Klein had been re-elected twice. Small town, limited scandals. But he'd seen what happened when officers made headlines for the wrong reasons. He reviewed the footage twice, then asked the clerk to email it to the city server. No words, just a firm nod. Outside, Fielder got back into his cruiser. Hobson lingered, chewing his cheek, then followed. Darius stepped back as Tamika started to pull out. "You heading home?" he asked. "Yeah, I'll follow you." She didn't argue. They drove off, one behind the other. Slow, calm, but this wasn't over. Inside the mayor's office the next morning, 3 names were on his desk. 2 deputies and a gas station clerk. One with a complaint, one with a record of pushing boundaries, one with a phone full of receipts. But before the day ended, word had spread that things wouldn't be swept under the rug this time. By 9 Baldwin County was buzzing, and not in a good way. Phones rang, emails pinged. A clip from the gas station had already made its way onto local Facebook groups. Just 2 minutes long, shaky, filmed from the clerk's phone, but clear enough to see everything. A tired nurse in scrubs, 2 officers pressing her for no reason. Then the black SUV. Then the man who changed everything with nothing more than a voice and a stare. By noon, the county sheriff's office had released a short statement. "The incident at the Shell station is under internal review. Both deputies involved have been placed on temporary administrative leave pending investigation." But the town was already talking. Down at Bishop's Diner, Miss Linda was wiping down the counter when she heard the news. "Tamika Rollins? That's Shirley's girl, ain't it? Always been polite, that one." At Baldwin County General, Tamika clocked in as usual. Some of her co-workers gave her longer looks than usual. One nurse leaned in and whispered, "Saw the video. You handled that like a boss." Tamika just nodded and kept moving. There were people to help, IVs to check. No time to process the storm she'd just stepped out of. Meanwhile, Darius Rollins wasn't sitting idle. He wasn't the kind of man to raise hell in public, but he knew how to make phone calls that moved quietly through the right channels. Generals, former colonels, contacts in D.C., people who didn't ask how he was doing. They asked who needed to be spoken to. Still, something bothered him more than what had happened at the station. It was what Tamika hadn't said. The calmness she wore like armor. The way her hands had trembled, not in fear, but in fatigue. He remembered when she was little, how she'd stand on the front porch waiting for him to come home from deployment, tiny braids bouncing as she ran to him. She never asked what he did overseas, never questioned the time he missed. She just hugged him like he was still 10 feet tall. And now, she was the one standing tall, in a parking lot under pressure, alone, until he showed up. Later that evening, he showed up at her place. She lived in a modest 1-story house near Lake Sinclair. Nothing fancy, but clean, safe. The twins were on the living room floor building a Lego fortress. Tamika was in the kitchen, stirring a pot of chicken soup. "Smells like something real," Darius said as he walked in. She smirked. "You eat yet?" "Always make room for yours." They sat at the small kitchen table, steam rising between them. No words for a while. Then Tamika asked, "You think they'll actually do something this time?" Darius tilted his head. "They already started. That video. It made its rounds. You're not just a nurse anymore. You're a face in a story that doesn't go away quietly." "I don't want to be a face," she said. "I just want to raise my kids and not get followed at gas stations." "I know. But sometimes the stories find us whether we want them or not." She stirred her soup slowly. "I just kept thinking, what if the boys were with me?" Darius leaned forward. "Then they would have seen how a strong woman handles pressure, and how a father backs her up." She didn't say anything after that, just reached for his hand, squeezed it once, then let go. Across town at the sheriff's office, Fielder sat in a meeting room, quiet, watching the video again on a city laptop. Hobson sat across from him, red-faced, arms crossed. The internal affairs officer took notes silently. In the background, someone mentioned the mayor had reached out to the state attorney general's office. Things were moving now. Fast. But the biggest shift was happening in the hearts of those who'd seen the video and realized silence was no longer an option. By the third day, it wasn't just local. Regional news picked up the story. The headline was short, direct. Hospital nurse questioned without cause. Father's presence shifts entire encounter. Photos of Tamika in scrubs, framed beside a still of her father at the gas station, circulated online. News vans showed up outside Baldwin County General. A reporter tried to approach her in the parking lot. She didn't speak, just walked inside and clocked in. Tamika wasn't trying to be famous. She wasn't looking for praise. She wanted her boys to grow up safe. She wanted to keep doing her job, helping people who came into the ER scared and in pain. But for the first time in years, people were calling her name for something other than a patient's room. At home, her inbox filled with messages from strangers, nurses in other states, single mums, military families, young women who said, "I saw you. I've been there too." It was overwhelming. She printed one out and taped it to the fridge. Just one. You held your ground, and it reminded me not to shrink in the face of wrong. Meanwhile, Sheriff Brunner, who had been quiet through the entire storm, finally made a public statement. He didn't dodge. He didn't deflect. At a town hall meeting, he stood in front of a packed room at the Milledgeville Civic Center and said, "This department failed someone. We're taking steps to make sure it doesn't happen again." He looked at the audience for a long moment, then added, "And to Ms. Rollins and her family, I apologize." Darius didn't clap. He didn't nod. But he watched from the back of the room, arms crossed. Not with suspicion, but with measured understanding. He knew real accountability wasn't about speeches. It was about follow-through. And to Sheriff Brunner's credit, things did start to change. Mandatory body cam training was enforced. Officers were required to complete de-escalation sessions, not just once, but every quarter. Hobson was suspended without pay while the review continued. Fielder voluntarily stepped back, requesting reassignment to community outreach. But none of that reversed what happened. That Saturday, Darius took the twins out fishing near Carr's Station Road. Old cane poles, packed lunch, a calm lake. The boys laughed, asked questions, tried to sneak cookies before lunch. He didn't talk about the gas station, didn't mention the news. He just watched them, listened to their laughter, protected their peace. Back at Tamika's place, she sat on the porch steps, watching the sunset alone. A neighbor walked over, carrying a plate of banana bread. "I just wanted to say," the woman hesitated, then handed the plate over. "What you did, what you went through, it was wrong. I'm sorry." Tamika took the plate. Surprised. "Thank you." The woman didn't stay long, just turned back and waved. Moments like that, small, quiet, honest, meant more than any headline. Later that evening, Darius sat across from Tamika again, a soft jazz station playing low in the background. "You know," he said, "what happened might fade in the news, but those boys will remember." Tamika looked at him, tired but steady. "Yeah, that's what scares me." "Don't let it," he said. "Let it shape them. Not into people who fear the world, but into people who stand in it without flinching." She didn't speak right away, just leaned her head back and let the silence wrap around them. Because this wasn't about going viral. It wasn't about vengeance or punishment. It was about telling the truth, without shouting. About holding your ground when no one's backing you up, until someone finally does. But before the story ended, Tamika had one more thing she needed to say. Sunday came quiet. No calls, no reporters, no new footage circulating. Just quiet. Tamika stood at her kitchen sink, washing a single coffee mug. Outside the window, her sons were in the yard, laughing as they took turns jumping off a tree stump, pretending it was a spaceship launch pad. Nothing dramatic, just the kind of moment she fought to protect every single day. Darius was sitting on the porch, polishing an old pair of boots that looked like they'd seen deserts, jungles, maybe more. He wasn't saying much. He never did when things were finally still. Tamika dried her hands and walked outside. "You ever think about why I never joined the military?" she asked, leaning against the porch rail beside him. He looked up, curious. "Thought you just didn't want to." "I didn't," she said. "But not because I was scared of it. I saw the kind of man it made you. Strong, respected, always watching every angle in a room." He waited. "But I wanted to be the kind of strong that heals, that looks someone in the eye and tells them it's going to hurt, but they'll survive it. That's why I picked nursing." Darius nodded slowly. "You chose a different battlefield." "I didn't expect the fight to follow me to a gas station." He didn't say anything. She sighed. "I hate that the boys are going to see this world for what it is." "They will," he said. "But they'll also see how their mama stood tall, how she never cracked, never apologized for existing." Tamika looked out at her boys again. "I just want them to grow up knowing it's okay to ask for help, that it's not weakness, that strength doesn't mean silence." Darius nodded again. "That's a lesson even grown men forget." The porch creaked slightly as she shifted her weight. "You know what really stuck with me, though?" "What's that?" "When I called you. You didn't ask what happened. You just said you were coming." He looked over at her, eyes steady. "That's all you needed to hear." Tamika smiled. "Yeah, it was." Later that evening, she sat at her kitchen table after putting the boys to bed. A notepad in front of her, pen in hand. She wasn't much of a writer, but tonight she had something to say. She wrote, "To the women who are tired but still standing, to the men who've carried too much without complaint, to the parents who teach strength without anger, to the daughters who hold their breath every time they see flashing lights in the rearview mirror. I see you. It doesn't always take shouting to be heard. Sometimes just being still and steady is loud enough. And if no one's come for you yet, call them. The right people show up, even if they come quietly." She folded the note and stuck it to the fridge under the same magnet that held the message from the stranger. Two sides of the same voice. When Monday came, the news cycle had already moved on. But in Baldwin County, the story stuck. Not as a scandal, but as a shift. The clerk kept his job, the sheriff kept his word, and the Rollins name meant something more now. Tamika never asked for attention. She just wanted fairness. She didn't demand the world change in a day. She demanded it start with one night, one woman, one truth. And it did, because real change doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it arrives in a dusty parking lot, riding in a black SUV with a voice that says, "I'm here." So if this story moved you, even a little, share it. Speak it, remember it, because someone else might be standing at pump number 4 right now, wondering if they're alone. And your voice might be the one that makes the difference. Subscribe for more stories that matter. Stories that remind us we're not invisible. We're seen, we're strong, and we're still standing.